Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am Carlet Parra, Department Chair of Biochemistry at the University of New Mexico and Chair of the ASBMB Women in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology Committee. I am delighted to welcome you to our webinar, The Power of Yes and Knowing When to Use It. Much of the professional advice we hear focuses on the importance of saying no to protect time, to set boundaries and prevent burnout. But today we will shift in that perspective. We will explore how saying yes can open doors to unexpected growth, meaningful experiences, and career-shaping opportunities. Our session will be featured reflections from leaders from across academia and industry who have said yes at pivotal moments in their careers, whether to leadership roles, national service, mentoring commitments, or outreach. They will share how these choices shape their personal and professional journeys, even when the time was not perfect. Before we begin, just a quick reminder, you are welcome to submit questions at any time using the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We will have plenty of time at the end for the audience Q&A. This session will be recorded, and the recording will be available on the ASBMB website. I am honored to host this fantastic panel with us today. Karen Allen, professor and former chair of the Department of Chemistry at Boston University. Chandrima Mahundar, postdoctoral fellow at the University of California, Berkeley. Juanita Limas, senior advisor in molecular pharmacology at Eli Lilly and Company. And Nick Rind, professor in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Technology at UMass Chan Medical School. To start, each panelist will share a brief 4 to 5 minutes reflection on times when they chose to say yes to opportunities that felt risky, but ultimately paid off in unexpected ways. Tell us what motivated your decisions, what challenges did you face, and how those choices shape your careers. Let's begin with Karen Allen. Karen, thank you for being here. The floor is yours. You're mute.
Unmute. So I thought I would shape my answer to this question around the various administrative tasks that I've been offered over my time as a professor and chair of chemistry department. So, when I was a junior professor, of course, I was very protective of my time. And I really wanted everything I did to have this big impact, right? Because you only have limited time, and you've got to parse that out. And so one of the two of the different jobs that I was offered at that time was grad recruiting and also some positions on faculty recruiting committees. And I was like, how am I going to possibly have time to do this? And what is this going to get me? Okay, so I'll tell you what I wound up saying yes at that time. And I think that in retrospect, it was a good idea because for grad recruiting, in a best case scenario, I might have found somebody who would want to join my lab. But even in the worst case scenario, what I learned was from the rest of the committee. I really learned what qualities they valued in grad students, and it really helped me make decisions later about who to seek out in my own lab in terms of undergrads, grads, and postdocs, right? Same thing with faculty recruiting. I was just a junior faculty member, but A, I was helping to shape the department. B, I saw what my colleagues valued in these people we were trying to recruit, and that helped give me clues about getting promoted myself. Okay, so this is definitely like I helped others, but I was really helping myself, which was great. The other thing is later in my career, I was offered a place on the tenure and promotion committee. And this can be a lot of pressure and a lot of time. You're meeting for hours every week, and it's almost like being on a study section. That's a big committee at any university. And really, it's one of the most important committees on campus. And so one thing that I realized was the other people on the committee and the chair of that committee were people who were being groomed for leadership positions at the university. And it gave me the chance to work with those people and have them get to know me. Time commitment, huge, but and that seemed very risky at the time. It was a little later in my career. I already had tenure and everything, right? But still, these big time commitments are always a little risky to take, right? So that was another moment where I was really worried about it. I was worried how it would affect my career, but I got to work with some of the leaders in the university. And in my university, there are people from other departments outside the natural sciences that I never would have gotten to meet otherwise. And so that was just, what can I tell you? It was pleasant. It was pleasurable. That was a fun part of being on that committee. And then lastly, as department chair, of course, that's an enormous job. It is pretty much an all encompassing job. But, if you want to keep the doors open, you have to think of this not as a fork in the road where you're going to go as a department chair and then only go on an administrative path after that. You want to keep your lab going, and if you want to keep your lab going and you want to keep on a path, which is, going back to being a professor after being chair, which is what I'm doing, that's great. But also, having been chair, you get so much training as an administrator, on the job training, right? And so you are basically well set up to move into other administrative positions, either in your own university or other universities, which is great. So more opportunities opened up for me being department chair as either, and in some other administrative role, which has been really nice to have those opportunities presented to me. One note that I would give about this is just that being a department chair is being different than being like a program director. And so one thing that's always important is, thinking about if you start to direct a program, it can also be a lot of work, like being a chair, but there's not as much national exposure as chair as there is being chair. And it may be resource limited compared to being a chair. So always check what your resources are going to be before you take on a big role. Okay, that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for sharing how saying yes created space for growth and potential new directions. Next, we'll hear from Chandrima Manduhar, a postdoctoral fellow at UC Berkeley. Chandrima, we're excited to hear your perspective.
Thanks a lot, Carlette. So my story for a time when I said yes and had it pay off massively was when I did a summer internship between my fourth and fifth years of graduate school. So now, if you think about it, your fourth and fifth year is kind of when you're doing your final pushes to like finish all your projects, get your papers written, get your dissertation done. And taking 3 months off at that time did seem a little bit risky because I was like, it's going to slow my work down, it's going to delay graduation. My PI might be like a little bit concerned about my papers getting out. But at the time, I was kind of trying to think about what I want to do with my career. Like after my PhD, do I want to go into academia? I was mainly thinking about going into industry, but I wasn't sure. My research till that point got me interested in structural biology, but I really didn't know what like it would entail. Like I had colleagues who did it and it seemed interesting, but I didn't know what it actually was. So at the time, I thought that doing an internship in industry might be a good career move for me because that will help me clarify what I want to do after the next year once I graduate. So I applied for a few internships. I got an internship in the structural biology department at Genentech, and that was one of the most transformative experiences I've had. I got to see what it's like to do research in industry. I saw that there's a ton of research, like people aren't only working on pipeline projects, people do have some flexibility to do their own research as well, which was pretty interesting to me. And it turned out to be a super confidence building experience for me because up until that point, I'd only ever worked on my dissertation project with my lab mates. I'd never worked with any other types of colleagues. I'd never worked on any different project, but it showed me that I do have the transferable skills to just move into a different project and get started and actually make some progress in 3 months. So I was able to like contribute pretty well to that project. It also really helped me build my network. My mentor was super amazing. She introduced me to a bunch of different people in her team. And I also set up these one-on-one informational interviews with other people in the company and learn more about their job and like what the day-to-day life there was like. And that was a huge like great experience for me because that's what convinced me that the best step for my career after graduation would not directly to go into industry, but to do a postdoc where I would learn structural biology and use those skills to ultimately weave my way back into industry in a field that I really wanted to contribute to. So that's what shaped my decision to like join my present postdoc lab to learn cryo-EM. It also shaped my decision to like change my field a little bit. I was working in DNA repair, but I had shown myself that I can clearly work in a different field as well. So now I work on translation of proteins. So that was pretty transformative. And finally, I have a network of people in industry who I keep in touch with even now. And if I need anything, like if I need a referral for a position, if I need some insight, um, they're there to help me out at that time. So I would say that has been my, big yes moment. It didn't delay graduation. Like 3 months seems like a lot of time, but it really is not that much in the grand scheme of things. If you think about like the 5 or 6 years it generally takes to do a PhD. Yeah, so that's my story.
Thank you, Chandrima. Thank you for those reflections on embracing new opportunities. Next, I'd like to turn to Juanita Limas, Senior Advisor at Eli Lilly and Company. Juanita, we're looking forward to hearing your reflections.
Thank you. It's funny, we didn't even chat about what we were going to be talking about, but mine piggybacks off of Chandrima's really well. There's a quote that I usually think about as I'm trying to examine some sort of decision I'm making. And I always think about this quote that says, you don't have to be ready, you just have to be willing. Right. And so that, when I think about the times that I've had to say yes, that really simple truth has really echoed throughout most of meaningful moments in my life, especially when it came to service and mentorship. So, I wish I could tell you that, I've always stepped into these roles with confidence, with, energy, a clear schedule. I haven't. There's times where I've been completely overwhelmed. I've been stretched thin. I've been unsure of myself, plain tired, and somebody has asked me to do something, and I've wanted to say no, but I usually say yes. And part of the reason why is because usually I've been in these situations not because I really had it all together, and it's not because I had extra time, it's not because I wasn't tired, but I knew that if I showed up, even if I was not perfect, it was better than not showing up at all. And I said yes to mentoring someone who reminded me of myself many, many years ago. I was unsure, I was hesitant, I was full of questions, I didn't know how to transition to industry. I've said yes to serving in spaces that were really unfamiliar, somewhat intimidating, where I was a learner as much as the leader. I've got two instances where briefly I just wanted to talk about what Chandrima had talked about. I get asked all the time in industry to informally mentor interns, and they're interns, either PhD students or postdocs that are doing internships in industry. And quite frankly, I have a lot on my plate. And a lot of times I really do want to say no, but I do remember that somebody at some point mentored me when I was in the same scenario. So it makes that decision really hard for me to say no. And so I always say yes. If somebody wants to have an informal relationship while they're here doing an internship, I always do it. Offer coffee or even a biweekly meeting. The other time that I was asked to lead to step up and lead was I was asked to lead a brand new team about a year ago here at Lilly. We were launching a brand new target. And these were leaders, structural biochemists, computational biologists. It was a team, a cross-functional team that spanned multiple continents. And they all had many years of experience. And I was asked to lead this team. And that was pretty intimidating, but I said yes. And what I've really come to understand is that saying yes doesn't inconvenience us, it deepens us. Saying yes when we feel unqualified doesn't expose our flaws, it exposes our courage. And saying yes, when I say yes over and over again, it's kind of, in my opinion, kind of a quiet form of leadership because I role model and I show other people that I can say yes to something and I might be able to change somebody else's life. And sometimes they're able to change my life as well. So, I'm somebody that doesn't always have the time. I don't always have the perfect plan, but I always continue to say yes. So, yeah.
Thank you, Juanita. Thank you for sharing how saying yes moments have opened doors for service and mentoring. Very important. And finally, we will hear from Nick Rind, professor at UMass Chan Medical School. Nick, we want to hear from you. Mute. You're mute.
There we go. I just want to be like Carlette and Karen. So I want to start off by making explicit something that's been sort of implicit in the other stories you've heard. And that is, if you have an incredible opportunity at a perfect time, saying yes is easy, right? That's not a challenge. What happens is when you have either something you'd love to do with terrible timing, or something that you're not sure that you would love to do, and you probably could do it, but it's kind of scary, and maybe it's a challenge, and maybe you're worried how it's going to turn out. So I would just going to start off with, or I'll tell you two short anecdotes. One, when I was able to say yes to something that I really wanted to do when the timing was terrible. And another thing where the timing actually was really good, but it was something that was kind of scary and I wasn't sure that I should do. The first was when I was on the more junior side of mid-career. The chair of my department, Bob Matthews, stepped down as chair of the ASBMB Public Policy Committee, the PAC, the Public Affairs Advisory Committee. And he knew that I had an interest in politics and an interest in policy. I'd never really done anything about it, but I talked about it a lot. And so he put me up to replace him on the committee. He said, you should apply. And it was something that I didn't really know how to do, but it was something I knew I wanted to do. And it was sounding really exciting, but the timing was terrible. I had grants to write, I had papers to write, I had a lab to run. I didn't feel like my lab was running, was not self-sufficient. It required a huge amount of effort at that point. I was teaching. But I decided that it was something that is something I did want to do. And I was going to try. And it worked out great. I mean, that's why I'm here today, right? That's how I got involved with ASBMB. I was 6 years on the PAC. When I rolled off the PAC, they were kind enough to accept my application to Women in BMB. And it's been a great opportunity for me to do work that I like, to advocate for things that I think are important. But the most important thing I learned is that there's a lot of support out there for these sorts of opportunities, right? I joined the PAC not knowing how to advocate, not knowing how much time it would be. And the other people on the committee, both the other academic members and the ASBMB staff, were incredibly supportive. They taught me what I needed to know. And they're incredibly flexible. When I had the time to put in effort. They were guided me to be productive and useful. And when I was busy, they were very understanding. And there's no obligation to do things that are when you have other commitments. And so that opportunity to say yes, I learned that if you are going to say yes, look around for the support that's going to help you to do what you want. And is going to allow you to succeed in maybe not the highest priority, maybe not even in the top 3 or 4 highest priorities in your career, but something that you enjoy doing. It can be very satisfying. The other opportunity was when I had all the time in the world. It was during COVID. I had nothing better to do. And a colleague of mine asked me to write a book chapter. So something that never occurred to me that I would ever do. In high school, I took science and math classes because I was not very good at reading and writing. And of course, the painful irony is now I spend all day, every day reading and writing. And I've gotten better at it, right? These are skills you can learn. But I've never considered them my superpowers. And so one of my colleagues said he wanted me to write a chapter for this textbook he was working on. It was going to be genes and genomes, which is a big topic that I know a little bit about, some of it, but certainly not enough to write a textbook chapter. But I had, like I said, nothing better to do. So I figured, what could possibly go wrong? And I jumped in, and I was amazed how much fun, how satisfying. I mean, I had to learn a huge amount, right? I did not know the material for this chapter, but I learned what I needed to know, and I found it incredibly satisfying. And the final product was really, really something I never imagined I'd be able to do. And so now, against the advice of all of the people I respect most, I'm actually writing an entire textbook by myself. It is not going as quickly as anyone could have predicted. It's not going as quickly as planned, but I am enjoying it. I'm learning a tremendous amount, and it may end up being one of my most significant academic contributions. So that was a chance to sort of do something that was really scary to start off with, but has worked out well.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for sharing how your yes experiences, when the time was no ideal, obviously, gave it tremendous opportunities and for fulfilling. I want to remind the audience to use the Q&A box, and we'll try to get through each one of your questions. I will now lead session with a couple of moderated questions, opening the floor for the audience Q&A. Then this first question is for Karen. How do you determine if an opportunity aligns with your core values and long-term goals before committing?
So first of all, it's really important to know what your long-term values and goals are. I actually say that, it sounds like a joke, but I really mean it. Whenever anyone comes to me, we first think about, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years, right? And so, so first of all, have long-term values and goals. Second of all, I think that it's very important to me when I start to think about taking on a task and seeing if it aligns with my goals, is just to simply say, what is my best case and worst case scenario? So if this is wildly successful and I absolutely achieve all of the goals of the project, am I going to be satisfied with that outcome? Is that the outcome that I want? Is that going to give me, is that going to give me pleasure knowing that I've achieved that goal? So that's a really important thing, is just to know what your long-term goals are, and actually to just say to yourself, in the best case scenario, and I'm able to achieve the goals of the project, will I be doing something that is important to me, and important to also to the actual let's say it's either something like ASBMB or my department, but who is it that I'm trying to serve? And do I really think that if in the best case scenario, what I achieve will actually serve them? If not, we need a deeper discussion. we need a discussion of whether the organization really wants to do that thing. So that's my, yeah.
Thank you. Then, Chandrima, could you like to add to that?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, like Karen mentioned, you definitely need to know what your core values and long-term goals are. And to like also figure out if this opportunity aligns with that, I would start by asking more questions. Like, does this opportunity help me build a new skill? Will it boost my credibility? Will I learn something new? Will it improve my leadership skills? You can ask this of the person who's presenting you with this opportunity, or start with your mentors. A lot of your mentors would either have been in the situation in the past, know someone who's been in the situation, or can connect you with someone who's been in the situation. And I would ask them, like, what does this entail? Will this help me going forward? Is it worth my time and effort? Can you connect me with someone I can speak to who will tell me more about this? And if your mentor doesn't know someone directly, someone in your broader network will. Like if there's a program of some sort, they usually have a list of people who was in this program before. I've had surprising luck just cold emailing people and being like, hi, could you just spare like 15 to 20 minutes of your time telling me about this? And an example I can give is I mentioned I want to do structural biology in industry, and to like kind of get a sense of what that means, I've been attending various webinars and like informational sessions. And after a webinar on this topic, I reached out to each of the panelists and I was like, hi, would you be willing to do like a 15-minute informational interview with me? And not everyone replies, but one person did. And we spoke for like 30 minutes about her job, her ins and outs, how she positioned herself for this role. And she's even like kept in touch with me and offered to put in a referral if I need that. So I would start by, asking anyone you know more questions that will help you clarify this.
Thank you, Chandrima. Does somebody else in the panel wants to add to this question? We have many more questions too. Nick, you were thinking about saying something.
Sure. I will just say my advice would be to go with your heart. If your heart is telling you this is something you don't want to do, say no. The power of yes should not get in the way of your power of no, right? These are two very important powers you need to keep balanced. But if your heart says, oh, if this worked out, it would be great, but I'm not sure, then maybe that's something you should think about, right? Maybe you should be willing to take the leap. And again, look for people who can support you and help you succeed in something that maybe seems a little scary or is a little bit outside of your wheelhouse. My experience has always been that trying to figure out things in advance has always been very hard for me, and I've had much more luck just sort of going with what felt right.
Good advice. Then the next question is for Juanita. Then how do you reconcile the benefits of saying yes with the need to protect yourself, your well-being, and prevent overcommitment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will freely admit that I was not very good at that before I came into industry. And because the fact of when you are in industry, your time is money. And so it's taken me a while to sort of learn that. But in many aspects, but also to learn to be very selfish with my time. So I used to say yes to every opportunity, and I was one of those that got burnout in grad school, got burnout in industry, and I realized that I wasn't giving 100% of my time to showing up, right? And so for me to be better at that, I had to be much more rigid with that. For me also, it's been, and this is something I don't know if others can relate to, but for me it's been a challenge to try to figure out when to say yes or no, because I think my innate ability, my status, right? So I'm first generation, I'm a woman, right? And so I'm always the one that wants to jump in and do things like that. And so one of the things that makes it really hard for me is to, put on my hat, my husband will tell me it's my man hat, and to try to think like a man. And I know it sounds weird. It sounds, like I'm probably violating a lot of norms by saying that, but he's like, think about this if you were a man. And, we are really good at protecting our time, and you need to be better about, sort of try to coach me about that. So, there's a lot of things that I think about when it comes to understanding when to say yes to those. But I oftentimes will think about time. How valuable is my time? And can I do 100% for whatever opportunity I have? I may like to do a lot of different things, but if I'm doing 50% of my time in multiple things, that doesn't make me an effective leader. It doesn't make me an effective scientist. And I'm not able to bring 100% of myself to the table. So.
Thank you, Juanita. Anyone else in the panel has something to add?
I can add something really quick. So this is kind of related to the previous question about whether it aligns with your core values and long-term goals. And like Juanita mentioned, like earlier in your career when you're a grad student or postdoc, you tend to say yes to a lot of things. And I do think that's beneficial in some ways because more opportunities come to people that say yes. So you do want to be known as someone who's open to new things, and that way more people will reach out to you. But I do want to second that you want to make sure that you are giving your 100%. And that's what I always ask myself. Like, I am very passionate about mentoring. I'm here today because people took me into their labs and mentored me. So I'm like, I will give this back. But if I have say a summer undergrad and I can't give them 100%, it is a disservice to them and to me. Like, they don't have a good experience. They haven't learned as much as they could have learned, and I haven't done a good job. So whenever I'm presented with an opportunity, I err on the side of saying yes, but I always ask myself two questions. Can I do my primary research project still and make progress on that? And can I do a good job if I say yes to this? And that kind of helps me prevent overcommitment.
Then this is a follow-up question to what was just said. Then how did you communicate yes in a way that sets realistic expectations? You're going to commit 100% because you're ready for it. You're going to give everything from you because you're taking it seriously. But how do you say yes in a way that you can set realistic expectations?
I could jump in on that one. There's two things that I always like try to lay out is when I'm going to say yes. One is the exact timeline that's expected, right? Because I think we've all had it happen where you say yes to something, it seems like it's far off, okay, but then it creeps up on you very quickly, right? So one thing I try to do is to get some help setting intermediate goals and making sure that that's all, everything is square with the person I'm saying yes to, right? So getting a timeline in place that you hold yourself to so that you are really committed to that project and you're really doing it in a way that's going to lead to success. So timeline and resources. Before I say yes, what resources can you give me? What help am I going to get to do this project?
Thank you, Karen. I think Juanita had wanted to share some thoughts.
Yeah, it's literally, we were just like thinking about the same thing. I literally was like, get a clear structure about, like timeline. And I'm like you, like I'll say yes, and then things will creep up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not prepared. So before I do that, I try to get some clarity on what exactly am I saying yes to. And then I usually try to tell whoever it is I'm saying yes to, I do well with deadlines. So can you give me a reminder? Can you tell me? I know it's going to sound like, you're babying me, but please, like I don't get annoyed at that at all. Like, please send me a reminder, and I ask the person to do that. The other thing is if I'm on the fence and I want to say yes to something, and you know, I honestly don't have the time. I'll usually spin it a different way and I'll say, if I say yes to this, I don't think I'm going to do a good job. However, I do have somebody that I think would do a better job than I would. So, and because I want you to, like, we're talking to an intern, and let's say this happened to me last week, and they wanted me to informally mentor them every other week. And I said, I would love to do this, but for you, I want you to get the best experience that you can. And so I think you would be better off with so and so, because they're an associate vice president and they've expressed to me an interest in wanting to do this. And I can do this like maybe a couple times a semester, but I think you'd be better off with so and so. So I don't feel as bad because I'm trying to steer them in the right direction. But at the same time, I try to be realistic with those expectations as well. So
Thank you, Juanita. We have a
So-
couple of questions. Okay, Nick.
I'll just add one thing to that. And
Please.
actually, following up on Juanita's point, communication and transparency is really important. And so often you can say yes, but. And I'll give you a trivial example, maybe one that's not super generalizable, but I think it makes a sort of a useful example. And that is, we all get asked to review lots of papers. And so, you can't review every paper. And so I've got a rule. I will not have a paper deadline more than once a week. And so people will say, will you review this paper? And if it's a paper that I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting, I could contribute here, but I've got a paper due this week and the next week and the week after, I can say, yes, I can have this done in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And they'll say either that's fine, we're willing to wait, or no, we want to get it done and we'll look for someone else. And that gives them sort of they know what's available, and if that suits their needs, they can say yes to my yes, or if not, they can say no, we need more, and we'll go find someone who can do it more quickly.
Thank you, Nick. I think we can start moving on with some of the Q&A questions, and then we can come back to some more moderated questions if we have time. This question is for Chandrima. What emotions did you experience when you decided to take a different path from academia with your STEM background?
That's a really good question. Thank you for that. So I think a lot of us, me included, when we start grad school, we have this idea that we're going to become a professor. You're going to be a grad student, then you're going to be a postdoc, and then you're going to be a professor. And I think a lot of that is because that's what we've seen going into it. We really haven't been exposed to other career paths. So once I was in grad school for like 3 or 4 years, I started becoming aware of more career paths that open up after a PhD. And a reason for that, just going back to the theme of this webinar, is because I said yes to going to all of these kind of webinars and going to career panels and things like that. So the emotions I felt, I guess, started off with a little bit of uncertainty because this is what I know. Am I going to do something different? But in talking to other people and clarifying what their jobs look like, I realized that in industry, you can do research, which is what I love to do. You can work at the bench, you can progress science and do something that's helpful to humanity, which is, for me personally, I want to go into the drug discovery space to bring medicines to people in need. So I think it went through a period of uncertainty. I don't really know what this looks like. More clarity once I spoke to people and like got a sense of what this is going to be like, and then realization that actually I'm going to continue doing what I love to do, which is thinking about science, thinking about experiments, doing research, and helping people.
Thank you, Chandrima. Great answer. There is another question on the Q&A. This is for Nick. This is a person from Pakistan. And it said when he was in 12th grade and was going to start higher education, the father asked him to go for medical school, medical sciences. But he was very good in math. And now he's about to graduate in the 4th year of the medical program. And after that, they told him that he should go to gastroenterology, but he wants to go for general surgery. What should I do? Should I go with yes to my parents, or no and go for what I want? That's a hard question.
Yes, it is a hard question. I think it's a question that many people have dealt with, certainly within a family and also within institutions. I mean, there are times when your institution will say, this is what we need you to do. And you'll say, but this is actually, I would rather do this. You know, giving specific advice is dangerous. I would like to encourage you to figure out how to best address this. The advice I would give you is to figure out how to explain to your parents the decision, right? What are the pluses and minuses, both in gastroenterology and in general surgery? Why you feel that your strengths would be better directed towards surgery. And you may find that you're able to convince them that although, there's a lot of upside to gastroenterology, that is also surgery offers you tremendous opportunities that you can see, and maybe they don't see those. And if you can explain those to them, it might might change it from being a decision between what they want and what you want to a decision that you can all agree would be give you the most the greatest path for success in your career. It sounds like you're doing very well in your education, and the fact that you have these choices to make. I mean, these are really good problems to have, right? To be able to have to struggle with choosing between what sound like two very very potentially successful careers. So my advice would be not so much which decision you should make, but how you should approach making that decision, and see if you can create sort of the environment where you can convince your parents, or be open, let them convince you that what would be the best. And let me wish you very much good luck in whichever career path you choose.
Thank you. Please continue to use the Q&A, and we will try to get through as many questions as possible. Here's another question, and this will be probably for Karen. What strategies do you use to move past self-doubt or imposter syndrome when considering new opportunities?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So I think that one thing that I do is look at who has had, one very powerful thing is to just look at who's had that same position before you. Okay, so to just say, hey, who's in that? Let's say I'm thinking about moving up to a position. Who's had that position before me? How do I compare to that person? Who had the position before them? How do I compare to that person? Who else might be considered for such a position? Who can I think of who's better, qualified than myself that should have that instead? These are some thoughts that you could just sort of tick off to yourself, and seeing who is your predecessor in a position or in a particular opportunity, and also who else is going to be, let's say you're being asked to do an editorial role or a role as a committee member. Who else is going to surround you, and what are they like? What are their what's their standing in your field? What are their skill sets? And can they support you in the things you might think that you're weak in? Will your team be able to support you? You don't have to be everything. You just have to have the tools to do your major roles, and have people around you who can support you doing those roles and maybe push you to a new level of excellence.
Thank you, Karen. Good advice. Then, Chandrima, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I loved it. That was great advice, Karen. Thank you so much. I will be applying that moving forward. I think my strategy or advice would be to trust yourself and the person that's providing you with that opportunity, because a lot of times opportunities arise because someone either who you know directly has approached you with an opportunity or recommends you for one. And they're doing this because they believe you know you can, believe they know you can do what is required because you've demonstrated something like this before. So for instance, if your advisor is giving you the opportunity to represent your lab at a conference, it's probably because you have given good presentations before and they believe you will do a good job, or you will be able to figure out how to do a good job when you go there. Or if a colleague is recommending you for an opportunity, they are recommending you because they believe you could do it. And an example is a couple months ago, I got volunteered by my ASBMB committee to host a podcast. And I am very much an introvert. It stresses me out a lot to talk to people that I don't know. But I was like, okay, well, obviously they think I can do a good job. And even though it was a little bit uncomfortable at first, I was like, okay, I get to speak to people that, I have never met before, ask them about their job in a very like casual setting and learn so much more. And through that process, I have become a better communicator. So even though when the opportunity was presented to me, I was like, oh my God, what is going to happen? I let I trusted the person who recommended me for that opportunity. They told me I could do it because they've seen me do something like this before. So I would just, trust your own instincts and people in your network to help move past those feelings.
Yeah, it's good to have a sponsor. Always.
Absolutely.
Then I have the next question for Juanita. Juanita, you in one of your answers, you talk about being first generation. Then this question is, how did cultural or organizational norms influence when and how you felt comfortable saying yes?
That's a really good question. I alluded to that earlier. I will say that sometimes we do. I I will say me. Sometimes I have let some of the weight of either my community that I represent because I'm Latina, or my background because I'm first generation, and I've allowed that to sometimes hinder me from being able to get through some doors that maybe might have been closed to me. And that has been something that I've been really trying hard to reckon with, to try to understand that, there is a reason why I've been put into these opportunities in these positions. And that by saying no to those opportunities, I, in fact, could be doing a disservice to my community by doing that, by not being able to sort of open doors for other people. So I think for some people, myself, I'm just going to talk about myself, that I will sometimes I have to check myself when I'm going to say yes to an opportunity. When I hear that person, that little voice in my head saying, you can't do this, or, there's nobody in the room that looks like you. I get that a lot in industry because there are very few PhD Latina scientists around in general, and then in industry, there's just not a lot of us around. And I'm actually really not supposed to be here if you think about my whole story and you think about where I've come from, but I am here. And so I constantly have to reinforce that to myself and say, I wasn't given this opportunity. I've earned it. And so I've earned this spot at the table. Somebody believed in me and wanted me to lead a team that I had no idea how I was going to do this, and leading people who have been, in industry for 20 or 30 years. And I have 2 years of experience, but yet somebody thinks that I have the potential to do this. And so, but by doing that also, it also puts it on, sometimes it can put a very negative reflection, because then there's the weight of the community that also you carry with you. And so you really want to do a good job. So those of us that have been first gen have been probably told, you have to work 10 times harder than everybody else. I know other people have heard this. And so, you have to constantly work, and your work has to be perfect. And there can be a condition that is like paralyzed by perfection. You don't want to move forward until your work is absolutely perfect. And I've really had to learn that perfect doesn't necessarily mean that it's that it has to be that way. That it's okay to be imperfect. And by showing my imperfections and my flaws, it actually is a good way to lead other people. So.
Does anyone in the panel want to add to this question? I absolutely identify with that.
Yeah.
Karen?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I identify with that, and I have to say, like, never let perfect be the enemy of good enough. It's like sometimes the job just has to get done, and it has to get done in a certain time frame, and you're not gonna go for perfection. And it's more important to have it be timely and effective. Yeah.
Thank you. Then now, before we wrap up, I will ask the panelists to summarize in a few sentences okay, Nick, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to point out, Carlette, we have one more question in the Q&A. Actually, maybe two more questions in the Q&A now. One from Dr. Onifade, and apologies for that pronunciation if I got it wrong. Do you see that?
I see it. Thank you. Yes, I didn't see questions. I was going to move on, but this is great. The next question, thank you for this webinar. I completed my PhD last year, looking out for possible postdoctoral opportunities. I have applied to various institutions and labs, but no response, even to labs with open applications. I'm worried. Then,
Yeah, jump in
Sandrina?
and provide a little bit of insight on that. So one of the, getting a postdoc is a little bit different from getting any other kind of job because there are not that many open applications and a lot of it depends on just personal recommendations. So most of the times people get a postdoc because your PhD advisor puts you in touch with somebody else, or you've met someone at a conference and talked research with them, and then they have an open position and you apply to them directly. If you're applying cold, which is not exactly what I did, but a little bit because I was in the DNA repair field and I mentioned I moved into translation. You probably want to read 3 or 4 papers from that lab and really get a sense of what they're working on, and then kind of write an email saying how you're going to be able to contribute to that project based on your skill set and what your ultimate goals are. It is a lot of work. It's quite a bit different from applying to job postings and stuff because you do need to understand the lab's research and figure out how you fit into it. But yeah, I would recommend that you reach out to your PhD advisor and see if they can put you in touch with people that they know who are looking for postdocs. If you are in a position where you can attend conferences, which is a little bit difficult if you're not in an academic program, but if you can attend conferences, try to network with professors there. Or the third thing is when I mentioned, talk a little bit more about their research and how you can fit into that. It is a really difficult time right now, so don't lose hope. Just, make a list of people you're interested in and email them one by one.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandrina.
I'll add to that there's nothing that PIs like more than getting letters that directly address the work they're doing and offer useful ideas about what to do next. If you can find a lab that you really want to work in, or you may have to do this for many labs because not all labs have the resources to hire, but if you can find labs that you want to work in where you can say, I read this paper, I was super excited about this project. I think the next thing that I would like to do in your lab would be to, even if the lab doesn't want to do that, just the idea that someone's thinking about that lab's work independently is a real will attract attention, and I think is the sort of thing that PIs really appreciate.
Yes, thank you, Nick. Any other advice? Then before we end our session today, I will ask each of the panelists to summarize in a couple of sentences what practical tips can you share for recognizing when yes is the right answer in the moment. Okay, let's start with Karen.
Okay. I would say, don't do things out of a sense of responsibility / guilt. Make a list of what you think needs to be done and decide, am I the person to do it? Am I being given the resources to do it?
Thank you, Karen. Chandrima?
Yeah, I would say be open to opportunities, especially if you're early in career. You do want to be known as someone who is open and would like to take advantage of opportunities, but also someone who is reliable. So if you say yes, you do want to make sure you're able to do it to the best of your ability. And that kind of goes back to what Karen is saying. Clarify the timeline. An undergrad for 2 weeks is very different for an undergrad for 2 years. So make sure you know what you're getting yourself into.
Thank you. Juanita?
Yeah, I would echo all of that. All of that is like ditto, ditto. I would say saying yes is the right answer when the opportunity aligns with your values, when it serves a meaningful purpose, and you have the capacity to contribute with intention, right? So not out of guilt, not out of pressure from anybody else. So I would say trust your intuition, check your energy, and don't hesitate to say yes with boundaries if the particular moment calls for it.
And I got nothing to add. I would say listen to these amazing women in biochemistry and molecular biology. I know I certainly will.
Thank you, Nick. Then as we wrap up, I want to thank our panelists once again for sharing their wisdom and thank all of you for joining us today. We hope this session gave you new ways to think about evaluating opportunities, weighting competing demands, and recognizing when saying yes can lead to growth and fulfillment. On behalf of ASB&B, thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at future events. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.